I want to open this up. This is just a training course that if you are a hired person to learn how to do user stories, or you have an idea how software works, but don't know how to create user stories, this is what this position is going to be doing, is helping us be able to create user stories for our clients. Just a quick introduction. What user stories are, they're a crucial step to the developer, so that way they can be able to take the necessary tasks of definition of work and get the feature or application done based on that. And what I'm going to do is showcase an example. But what you need to have when you're doing this course is, one, you're going to have to know how to use ChatGPT and also Google Docs. And so what we need from you as a user story writer is to create the user stories based on the user story ID, and then moving on from the splash screen, home screen, login, authentication. There'll be a flow of how you create the user stories in order to help the developer create the application once they're done with the UI UX. Understanding the product scope and the user vision, we need to be able to make sure that you understand the flow of our system to be successful. If you look in the folder under the planning, you'll have the project charter, the project scope. It will be included in there. That way you can understand and read exactly what is happening. With the components of a user story, what we're going to be able to showcase user stories, you have the user story ID, user story title, user persona, user story definition, acceptance criteria, definition of done, priority, assigned to, status, comments and notes, attachment, links, and dependencies. For this instance here, this is something that the developer is going to look at, and then he's going to determine exactly what is necessary for him to be able to write. Let's go ahead and we are going to do an example here, and I'm going to move back over to ChatGPT. In ChatGPT, I've created this here, and this is just my ChatGPT example of this app called Tasker app. Let's go ahead and we're going to use this here as an example of a user story that we're going to create for our environment. And this is how it's going to be for you as a user story, how you're going to create these as you work through. What I'm going to do is create user story for, and then just paste. And here we go. Watch ChatGPT work. All right. Now we're going to go back to after this creates everything here. I went ahead and changed the screens. We both have ChatGPT and the Excel sheet open here. You can go through and it's pretty easy to do this. I'm going to take the template and I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to rename this one here, rename, and this is going to be task reminders. Okay. And so my last user ID story was 04. I'm going to put, this one's going to change to 05. Now you can put this on one sheet or you can separate this like I have here. This is going to be a separate story. All I'm going to do is going to copy. This is going to be task reminders and notifications, end user, and then we're going to copy criteria list, definition of done, priority is going to be high. This is going to go to the developer, not started, comments and notes, dependencies are going to be 3. Let's go ahead and we'll blow this one up here. Let's go through this real quick. This is the user story title, user persona, end user, and then the acceptance criteria. And we don't have to read through all these, but go through it, make sure that ChatGPT doesn't mess anything up. But most part, everything in the functionalities, we'll want to get the client's approval on a lot of these, but this is pretty much a baseline because normally the user stories are going to be what the user wants. If you have the project scope, ChatGPT can normally allocate and understand everything here. And then we can keep going through and understanding the home screen, the login registry, as you can see here. It has an identified user ID, user 1, user story ID 2, 3. The splash screen is 1. Ultimately, what will happen is that the developer will be able to understand the app built by the user story to allow them to create the app from start to finish. This will be what the developer creates. And this is called Figma. If you haven't, it's a wireframe designer. You have your splash screen to your logo, login, authentication. As you can see here, it flows with the chart, the registration, everything matches with what the story is telling. And with the user story, you have the splash, login, task reminder. And so we would just need to create this here to be able to create that next segment. And I have a shortcut on Figma that I can show real quick to do this. Now, as a user story, you don't have to worry about Figma, but just understand what the developer, from a developer or UI UX, what they're going to be looking for in order to create. What I can do is, there we go. And pretty much what I was able to do was take that user story. This is the app right now as you see it. And I do need to add, I would need to update the homepage so that way I have this task reminder button right there. Okay, so this was just an overview of user stories and how to create user stories in our environment using Google Docs and then being able to take a template. This is just an example of the Tasker app that we are building based on the project scope and project objectives and what is definition of done. And that's what we get from the clients. But your job as a user story creator is to take that information using ChatGPT and creating the Excel sheets based on what we want to provide the client. What I can do is, there we go. And pretty much what I was able to do was take that user story. This is the app right now as you see it. And I do need to add, I would need to update the homepage so that way I have this task reminder button right there. Okay, so this was just an overview of user stories and how to create user stories in our environment using Google Docs and then being able to take a template. This is just an example of the Tasker app that we are building based on the project scope and the project objectives and what is definition of done. And that's what we get from the clients. But your job as a user story creator is to take that information using ChatGPT and creating the Excel sheets based on what we want to provide the client.